Okay, welcome back. This is Nick Castellano again, and we're going to go into part 2 of the 7 verticals. And I'm really excited to give you this message just to show there is a direction and there is a place that you're supposed to be heading toward. You may not know at the end of this exactly what you're supposed to do in this vertical, but you'll know that this is the vertical you've been called to. Your passion, your purpose, all the talents that you have guide you toward this vertical, guide you toward this mountain so you become an influencer in this mountain, and you become excellent in this mountain. And see, people don't follow you just because you have God inside you. They follow you because you reflect God, you magnify God because you do it in excellence. See, Joseph did it in excellence. That's why he was an influencer of Pharaoh and became the number 2 man and was actually the power wielder in Egypt. So don't do it like halfway and say, well, God will cover it. Grace will cover it. That's not grace. Grace is that we had a sinful nature and we were covered by the perfection of Jesus. But we have to do the best that we can do so that we can do the best natural that we can do. And then we get our God super put on top of that natural. Does that make sense? The weak Christian time is over. The weak Christian time is over. It's time to stand up and become the salt and the light. It's time to stand up and become the ecclesia, the called out ones. Make a difference in this world. It's time to bring heaven to earth, because of the excellence that God has put in us, in purpose, in passion. And we're going to do this through business, that vehicle that we wrap around our purpose on. So, here are the 7 verticals of the 7 mountains. Number 1 is religion. 2 is family. 3, education. 4 is law, or government, some people will say. 5 is arts and media. 6 is technology, and I put energy as well in the technology bracket. And 7 is finance or banking. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these. First, I was asking God for some revelation on this. And he showed me that there are 2 key ones that we have to get right that influence the other 5. And one of those is which we're called to. And these 2 key ones are religion, or if you will, church, or relationship with God. And then number 2 is relationship with family. There's a 2 relationship. God said that God created us, and Jesus said, love God with all your heart, soul, and might, and love your neighbor as yourself. If you get these 2 right, everything else takes care of itself. So say we're called into the church, or the church mountain, if you will, or the church vertical. One of the problems we're seeing with a lot of pastors out there, and they're having a tough time, especially during these down times, is that they don't know how to do business. See, the business vehicle is part of the church. They have to steward over the things that they're called to do in the church. And they don't know how to do business. Matter of fact, they'll say, well, I'm not a businessman. I just support and edify people, and I just preach this word, and this is what I do. Well, that's a cop-out. That's a poor attitude. And if you're not going to learn how to do business, because Jesus said, do business till I come, and if you're not going to learn how to do business, then what you're going to have to do is get a businessman who knows how to do business to support you and stand beside you and make sure that the business decisions that are being made are proper business decisions, that there's proper stewardship over the church. Because the church's job is to provide for the widows, the orphans, and the strangers. That's why the church was started in the first place. And most churches can't even provide for themselves in today's society. So they're not even meeting the mantle of the church, which is widows, orphans, and strangers. So it's not really a church. So anyway, if you're called to the church mountain, if you're called to be an influencer of people through the church, then you need to at least have a businessman that knows how to utilize the business tools to ensure that the church that you're growing is a viable profit center, so that you can provide for the people that are going to your church instead of the government having to provide for them, so that you can influence the community, so that you can provide for the needs of that community, so that you can be the light of that community. So many churches nowadays are so incestuous in their vision. They only focus within, they don't focus without. See, the purpose of the church is to change the community. It's not to bring everyone into the basket and keep the light hidden under the basket. It's not about the church. It's about what the church can do for the people tank. Does that make sense? It's about what the church can do for the community, how the church can change what was dark and make it light. So you find the greatest need in that community. You go to the Chamber of Commerce. You find out what the need is in that community, and you fulfill that need. See, preach means to teach and show. It doesn't mean just to keep on teaching and talking. It's actually to make a difference. So pastors, if you're listening to this, it's time to change. It's time to support. It's time to make a difference in the community. And if you do what you're called to do, you'll be surprised what happens to your church. You'll be surprised to the abundance that's brought into your church. See, because people are not your provider. God is your provider. You've been given a mantle. You've been given a word. You've been given a thing you're supposed to teach. Teach it with all diligence and see God as your provider. We don't need to manipulate a way to get a bigger offering. We don't need to know how to move people to emotion so that the tithe of the offering can be a bigger number. That's not correct. We're not about building buildings. We're about building people. We're about changing the environment and edifying the people and building them up. See, church, you are a wellspring of light to change people. And with too many churches, as soon as a businessman comes in, they see a businessman as a mark, a way to get money into their hands, but they don't see that the businessman needs God as much or more than anyone because he's out making a difference in life. He's out there doing it. He's out to all these strange places like Syria and Saudi Arabia and Dubai, and he's out there doing things, and he needs the edification, the strength building, knowing that the life's blood is flowing from his little church community to him. Not the door shuts, good luck out there, just bring the money in. That doesn't work. That's not what he needs a pastor for. He needs one that's supporting him when he's going through this stuff. So that's what we're going to do with the church mountain. So if you're called to the church mountain, make a difference for the people that are making a difference. Be a supporter of the people. Remember this last thing. Everyone is a king and a priest under Christ Jesus. We're all under the order of Melchizedek. He was a king and a priest. We have our kingship in the visible realm of the purpose that we were created for, that thing we were called to do. And we have our priesthood in that thing, in the unseen realm. The priesthood is for the unseen or spiritual realm, and the kingship is for the seen realm. So we are all kings and priests, yet we all serve. So a pastor is a king and a priest in what he's called to do. And I serve him in that thing. I'm not serving him. I'm serving his anointing. I'm serving his godly purpose. And then he serves my godly purpose. And together it all works. It all meshes when we're all kings and priests and we're all servants. Does that make sense? Okay, let's move on. We talked about the family mountain a little bit. The family's the cell of society. This is the cell of society. It's the first thing that the enemy always attacks in relationships is that family relationship. Sometimes businessmen, we get so busy with business, we forget the business of being a papa or a mother. We forget that that's our number one duty. We forget that we're building up that next generation. And making money is never as important as building up that next generation. When my son comes up in the morning and I'm sitting there and I'm working, I get up early about 4. Today I got up at 4 o'clock and I'm working. And he comes up about 7 o'clock and he walks into the office. I stop what I'm doing. I push away from the chair and I put him on my lap. Because that's the most important thing, is that relationship. That relationship with a husband and a wife is the most important thing in that family unit. And what the world is working on is tearing apart the relationship of the family unit. If it can tear apart the cell, that building block of all society, then all society can crumble because there is no foundation. So, relationship with Papa, relationship with family. Those are your two building blocks for all the things that you're called to do. So we know that the first of the fivefold ministry is education or teacher. So if you're called to the education mountain or you're called to be a teacher, ensure that you're teaching from a place of God. that our education system today is teaching about how the public education system is teaching children to become drones, if you will. Do it this way. Yeah, they teach them reading, writing, arithmetic. We got to remember that the teaching system as it is today was originally constructed by the men of wealth so that they could create educated laborers for their businesses. Like the Fords and the Carnegies and so on. They had all these businesses, but they needed intelligent people to run these businesses. And so they set up this United States education system. Well, we were the number one educated nation in the world, according to the OECD, which is the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Now, this was set up about 30 years ago. And 20 years ago, we were the number one educated nation. Now, we're 14th. You see, the focus and the money is now shifted off of our education system. And it's now shifted to other nations because production doesn't happen in the United States anymore. One of the keys was to move all the production plants out of the United States into other nations with the guise of it being cheaper. And by doing so, we've lost the need to have the number one educated society. So just connecting the dots, we understand that this is what's going on right now. So you, as an instructor, I know you can't talk about God in the public school system, but you can talk about the truths that God represents. And many of the instructors, many of the teachers teach the truths. You don't have to put the stamp of God on every one of them. Truth reigns. Truth resonates. Truth is truth. It's changing many nations right now, like in Nigeria and like in Zambia. They have the government asking these men of truth, who happen to be Christians, how to make a difference in their country. And you'll watch a whole nation change its ways and become a Christian nation. The big things that are taken out of our society right now in the way of free-thinking educational things are things like the arts, philosophy, music, sports, things that edify, things that grow up, things that make you be a different person than every other person. See, God created us to be different than each other. And because of these differences, we are meshed together like a giant gear with the Holy Spirit as our grease, if you will, that makes us flow together. The world system is trying to make us all look the same. Get a job. Do the thing you're supposed to do. You, as educators in our school system that you've been called to, are going to teach truth. You're going to embrace the differences. You're going to let them expand on their differences and let them find their talents, find their gifts, and see them as strengths, not as weaknesses. Moving on, we have the vertical of law. And law is supreme to government. Law is, even governments are supposed to fall under law. However, in our government today, with the people we have in office, government is overpowering law. And we have people that are above the law, if you will. They're doing things that are against the Constitution, yet it's okay. So you've been called to the mountain or the vertical of law. And you'll learn the ways of this mountain. You'll learn the ways of this government. You'll understand their ways. You'll be smart as a serpent, but gentle as a dove. But you'll bring truth. You'll bring light. You'll bring the biblical principles into the law. And you'll be bold enough to stand up and say, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. So don't shirk. If you call to a political office and you feel that that's in your heart, that's the greatest servant. See, when you're called to a political office, people don't serve you. You're the greatest servant. And that's a part that we've forgotten in our governments today. We create these sheeple, if you will, these people that just follow like sheep blindly, instead of people that they're called to serve and make decisions that are best for the interests of the people. So, law is the next mountain. We're taught to empower the people, not control the people. We empower, not control. This is the fivefold ministry portion of this would be a pastor. A pastor's job is to empower, not control his people. His job is to support, edify, and serve. The pastor is the greatest servant. And so is the politician. The one in office is the greatest servant. Our president is to be the greatest servant in this nation because he serves all the people and he represents all the people. So think on that. Then we've got the media, arts, and entertainment vertical or mountain. Now these are, of the fivefold ministry, you would say these are the prophets. They basically say what things are going to be. And how they do that is by, they shape the mindset of the people by movies, by news, by other media sources like newspapers, books, magazines, and they tell the people what to think. How do they do that? How do they program the people on what to think? By their focus. They constantly inundate with fear. This, focus on this. This is how it's going to be. This is what it's going to be like. And fear creates more and more sheeple that are dependent upon the government or those in charge instead of empowerment, which is dependent upon you and your relationship with Papa. So, media, arts, entertainment, if you're called to that mountain, again, bring your truth, your purpose in a business vehicle, in excellence to that mountain to make a difference in arts and entertainment because you are changing the mindset of people. You are influencing a culture. You are changing the resonance frequency of a nation just by what's running through the airwaves. You'll change the focus of the people. You'll tell them to look on these things. I know many of you are called to the arts and media, and you don't have to always put the Jesus stamp on anything. Again, use the stealth mode. Use the excellence in business and use the truth in that excellence in business, and they'll know where it came from. The truth is the truth. It's not about just having to say Jesus or God. They'll come to you and ask. You don't have to hit them over the head with it like a brick. Next is technology. Technology is, if you will, the evangelist. These are the guys that bridge, they bring business by their creations in their mind. See, I guess I would be considered an evangelist when it came to business because I have patents. I've created many different products, and what the evangelist does is he brings the seed of business. He says, here's a thing that's needed, and I found a way that we can implement this thing that's needed. Now, the businessman, the financier comes and sees that and he goes, oh, let me invest in that idea. What a great idea. I want to be part of the technology that you've created. And what happens is one invests in the other, one works with the other, and all of a sudden you create this nice business. Maybe it's a public business with stock trades based on the idea of the evangelist, the idea of the technology, the entrepreneur, the inventor, if you will. And we do it through the vertical of technology. And technology is where we're all heading today. The problem with technology, especially in the computer industry, is that we have a lot of knowledge. We know everything at a fingertip, yet we don't implement that knowledge and convert it to wisdom. And then the biggest thing is that we don't have the understanding on why do we have this knowledge. We know my people perish due to lack of knowledge, but we have to use the faith step of implementing that knowledge, which is wisdom. So technology is an excellent sector. Ideas, patents. I believe that if you're called as a technology entrepreneur, if you will, and you have an idea, God provides or has provision laid up for you in that thing. The tough part is taking the step as if, and he'll meet you at that faith step in this technology industry. And nowadays, technology and energy are what it's all about. So if you're called to that mountain, you see you can make a difference. There's a guy named Nikolai Tesla. And Nikolai Tesla was contracted by J.P. Morgan to create radios. And while Tesla was investigating radio and radio waves and radio signals, he also tapped into an energy source that was free in the ionosphere. And he invented this thing called a Tesla coil. And now there could be free energy for the whole world just by the utilization of a Tesla coil and some Tesla balls. And it's the energy that's locked up in the ionosphere due to lightning striking the Earth. And lightning strikes the Earth 1,000 times a minute. Somewhere in the Earth, there's 1,000 lightning bolts per minute. And this energy is all stored up in the ionosphere. Well, Nikolai Tesla found that. He created this free energy. He proved it over and over again. He had light bulbs lighting up in the ground in some of his tests. He presented this to J.P. Morgan along with the radio idea. J.P. Morgan said, "What? And I can only build people for this little Tesla coil? No." And he pulled his funding and he shut him down because J.P. Morgan was all about shearing the sheep and Tesla was about serving the people. He wanted to get them this free energy source. So this free energy source that's still viable and still out there today is not being utilized because there's too much money in oil. There's too much money in fuel. There's too much money in gas. And we, the people tank, think that there's no other way to go. See, if we have godly people in this technology place, we'll realize that God didn't create any exhaustible sources of energy, that he already laid up for us that inexhaustible source that we could just tap into for free. But see, man has a great need to have power over man. Some men do. So those of you called the Technology Mountain, bring the truth of that to light and create the wealth in your life in this mountain, because then people can't influence you by showing you another $1 million or $1 billion. You have wealth already that God has laid up for you, that he's given to you, and you won't be influenced one way or another. And a matter of fact, you become the influencer, and you can bring the truth to this world, because we need it now. And it's available out there now. So if you're called to that mountain, bring your business vehicle to that mountain and bring your truth, your purpose to that mountain. And then we have the financing and the banking mountain. And this is what we call the preacher. He's the teacher and the shower. He teaches us how to utilize our funds, and he shows us by investing and financing. But right now, unfortunately, the finance or banking mountain has received trillions of dollars of input to the finance. I was just looking at some numbers the other day, and Citibank has over $2.8 trillion, yet it's not releasing any loans to anybody in the United States of significance. It's basically just hoarding cash. And there was a list of 12 banks doing the same exact thing, just hoarding cash and money lenders. And a story for this would be, I was in the middle of a build in Paradise Valley, and we were building a nice size house. It was a $5.2 million house is what it was going to be sold for, and it was going to cost me a little over $2 to build it. So there was a heck of a profit margin in there. We were in the middle of the build, and right in the middle of the build, and I had a buyer already on a signed contract, the bank pulled the loan from us. Now, we're in the middle of the build, and the bank pulls the loan from you. You have no way to finish this. There was no investors. Money was starting to be scarce. The bank pulled the loan because they made a blanket call to pull all loans on new construction. So with that, I had no choice but to say, well, bank, here's your half-finished house back, because I can't do anything. Now, that's a foolish thing for the bank to do if it's really out for the best interest of the people. I already had a buyer. It would have made us $3 million. The bank would have made their money back, and everybody would have won. But what they did was pull the loan, because it was time for them to influence and bring down the real estate market in the United States. And you'll notice it all happened like almost overnight. It was like no loans available, when before that, loans were available like crazy. So if you're called to the business or finance mountain, we're going to loan on godly principles. We're going to set up fair rates. The word talks about the money changers and Jesus throwing the money changers out of the temple. And the reason for that was they were using unfair weights when they were weighing how much they were bringing in. They were cheating the people, basically. And our banks today cheat the people. So if you're called into that, maybe open up your own bank. Do it the right way on biblical principles. Empower the people. Help the people grow their ideas. So this is what we're called to do. These are the verticals of the mountains that we've been called to. See, followers of Christ have got to stop looking at evacuation, hoping that there'll be a rapture someday and they won't have to be here and they'll be up with Papa God. We've got to remember we were created for earth. So we've got to stop the idea, the mentality of evacuation, and start looking to occupy. Do business until I come. And this is the mindset we have to have when we're seeking the mountain we've been called to, the purpose that we've been called to, the influence that we've been called to. And we have been created for a purpose. We have been created for a reason. And that reason is so that we can occupy until he comes back. So I want you to think on this. I have a little tool that I utilize for this. And it's 15 questions on purpose, or 15 questions on the mountain you've been called to. It's available on the BMI website. You'll have it available on this lesson plan, and our assistant will tell you more about it if you just click onto the next video. So I want you to do this. This is very important. I personally will look over this. It's very important for you to see where you've been called. And see, the bad thing about that is once you know where you've been called, you can't use the excuse that you don't know anymore. You do know, and you will know. It's time to step up and take back what's rightfully ours. So, thank you. Spend some time thinking on what we just talked about. See which mountain you've been called to, and be an influencer in that mountain. Thank you.